Good morning, all. Tim, James, and I will be talking about the economy of Japan for the next 5 minutes. And to begin with, I'm going to talk about the man in this photo. This is Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and he will go down in history as one of the most revolutionary prime ministers in the history of Japan. And in this presentation, you're going to find out why. This is an overview of what we're going to be talking about, but before I get into that, I just want to give a very high-level sort of overview of what the Japanese economy is all about. It's quite similar in makeup to Germany, with 70% in services. It's got the third largest car manufacturing industry in the world and the largest electronic goods industry. So moving on to GDP. This is a chart showing the trends in GDP over the past 3 years. And as you can see, it has behaved quite erratically over the past 2 quarters. 1.5% growth from January to April, and minus 1.8% growth from April to June. So the reason for this is because the Japanese government recently introduced a sales tax increase, which took place on 1st of April this year. And what people have been doing is bringing back their purchases of high-ticket items like houses, cars, durable goods to the quarter before the sales tax was introduced, leading to artificially high growth over here, and artificially low growth over here. So this isn't really representative of a long-term trend. So analysts expect GDP to pick up and grow at an annualized rate of 4% in the next quarter. So now I'll pass over to Tim, who will talk about inflation and unemployment.
Thank you, Ravi. So on this slide you can see the inflation trend since the year 2000. Now when Abe took office in December 2012, he was faced with really severe problems with deflation that they'd suffered for 2 decades. So he introduced a very accommodative set of policies known as Abenomics, and this has involved increasing the money supply by a massive 60 to 70 trillion yen, and he's also boosted government spending very heavily. You can see that deflation hit a record high of 2.5% in October 2009, but then in contrast it hit a 23-year high of 3.7% in May this year. And this was probably partly due to that sales tax that Rodney mentioned. Now it's at a level of 3.4%, which seems pretty healthy, and in the short term it's expected to stay around that 3% mark. Therefore you'd think Abenomics being pretty successful, but as James is going to discuss, in the medium term we've got perhaps a slightly different view. Now on this slide you can see the unemployment rate since 2005. Now over the last 60 years Japan has averaged an incredibly low unemployment rate of 2.7%, but you can see in July 2009, obviously the financial crisis, it hit a peak of 5.6%. It's now at 3.8%, which is very low in comparison to a lot of the major economies in the world at the moment, and it's also down, the number of unemployed people are down 2.7% on where it was this time last year. But having said all that, the outlook is certainly not all good at the moment, and it's actually expected that this unemployment rate is going to rise a little bit over the next few years. Japan's got a severe problem with a very ageing population at the moment, and not only that, but the actual number of working people is expected to decline by at least a fifth over the next 50 years. Now part of the Abenomics reforms is meant to tackle some of these employment concerns through reforming various regulations, which should hopefully make Japanese industries more competitive, but questions remain, is there going to be enough? On to James.
Okay, this is a long-term chart of dollar yen. As you can see, up to 2012 it was generally appreciating. You've got the deflationary trend there. In 2012 you had Abenomics. Since then it's been weakening. It's currently on 107, just broke out of the tight range. So our basic medium-term thesis for the yen is that we think the BOJ is going to be forced to buy a lot more JGBs than they're currently doing, because the portion of JGBs that isn't currently owned by the BOJ are mainly owned by 3 Japanese institutions: GPIF, Japan Post Bank, Japan Post Insurance. They've publicly said that they only want to own those bonds for a positive real rate of return. So you've got inflation at 3, the yield on Japanese 10 years 0.6. It's already a negative real rate of return. So you're already seeing this year net outflows from those institutions. They're selling bonds already. The more they sell, the more the BOJ has to buy. that's eventually going to be inflationary, and it's going to weaken the yen over the medium term, we think. So, recommendation: if our thesis plays out, you don't want to invest. You want to be short the yen, short rates. They have over a quadrillion yen of debt. That's over 1,000 trillion. So if their rates move 200 basis points north, their debt service costs are higher than the central government tax revenue. That's not a good situation. So yeah, there's many problems. You've got six central bankers in the last 15 years. Something's not right at the BOJ. You've got the population issues. So over a third of the population is over 60. A quarter is over 65. Yeah, not too good. So yeah, in summary, we're very bearish.